seen a large influx of new players, and with new players comes old mistakes. Being such a complex game, I wanted to cover some general tips that you can use to improve your gameplay. A lot of people aren't going to like to hear this first one, but at number 5, stop taking gun pods. There are some niche case scenarios where your aircraft physically doesn't have a gun unless you take a gun pod, and I can understand taking it there. The drop-off in flight performance you get from dragging these massive weights through the air is basically never worth it, and it doesn't facilitate gameplay where you can improve your aim either. The main thing though is you're trading off your main advantages for unnecessary levels of firepower. Now, I will say, it is fun every once in a while to absolutely delete somebody with way too many bullets, but in the average game, you're gonna find a lot more success in the long run if you leave these gun pods at home and focus on improving your aim with the guns the aircraft already comes with. This also generally applies for bombs, but with bombs, you can at least ditch them in emergencies or once you get to your base and you become a normal fighter again. Even if it leaves you with worse positioning, it at least gives you the opportunity to be a competitive fighter once they're off, as pylons in War Thunder don't induce any drag as far as I'm aware. But in situations like this, because the gun pods are so big and heavy, I'm unable to catch the Harrier here and I can't get the kill. Number 4 is taking head-ons, and no, I'm not saying cut it entirely out of your gameplay. Taking head-ons can be useful and can help you secure advantages. For example, a lot of US planes have 50 cals, which have a lot of range. This lets you spray outside of your enemy's range, and if you can put any damage on somebody, that's a good thing. Generally speaking though, for all aircraft, it's not good to commit to a head-on. When you do more than just spraying a couple rounds head-on, you're opening yourself up to a lot more unnecessary damage than you should be taking. And generally in War Thunder, that's a death sentence, as most damage will just absolutely kill your flight performance. Or if you're playing top tier, if you try and full commit a head-on, you'll just eat a radar missile to the face, and personally speaking, I don't really like to do that. My rule of thumb is that you shouldn't stick out the head-on once you no longer have time to react to your enemy's shots anymore. No longer should you take those last-second head-ons where both you and your opponent are trying to squeeze in 2 more bullets, and you end up crashing into each other, and both of your planes turn into fireballs. And if you're at top tier jousting radar missiles, if your opponent gets off their missile first, you shouldn't be committing to that fight unless you know how to dodge that missile. If you're near the deck, you can sometimes rely on dragging their missile into the ground by flying really low, but also it's not 100% reliable, as every once in a while, the radius of splash damage will end up damaging your plane regardless. This lets you, however, shoot your missile second and still get away with it sometimes. Overall, just don't stick head-ons if these next two are pretty similar, so I'm just going to introduce them together. 3 and 2 are climbing and energy management. First of all, in every single prop in the game, whether that's a Russian prop that doesn't like being at altitude, or American props with a big advantage in altitude, you want to climb regardless. And what I'm about to say also applies to low-tier jets. Having speed may keep you alive by letting you maneuver, but climbing gives you some really good life insurance. If you ever find yourself low on speed and you need to get out of somewhere fast, the easiest way to do so is to just let gravity do its thing. You can just dive straight back out to pick up all the speed you need. But hey, you can't do this if you don't climb. Especially you American players, you guys need to be climbing the most because it gives your planes the most advantages. The number of P-47s that I see just sitting on the deck mowing the lawn with their propellers, when you don't climb like that, you're giving the enemy team every single advantage over you because they have significantly more energy. And if you don't know what energy means, I keep saying energy. It's how much speed and altitude you have. In jets, it's a little bit different. You want to have speed because jet engines perform better the faster they go. However, if you don't give yourself a little bit of altitude, you're relying solely on your speed to carry you through the game. But if you climb a little bit, not as much as you would in props, but just enough to have a little bit of a safety net if you ever get into a bad situation. At really high tiers though, where you have afterburning jets that can go Mach 2, you don't need to climb if you don't want to. Let's take some examples. Most obviously on the screen right now is the P-47, which is pretty awful at dogfighting if you don't give it speed to work with. If I hadn't climbed and I was just sitting on the deck, people could dive on me and I wouldn't have enough energy to work with to be able to evade multiple passes. You could probably dodge 1 or 2 times, but after that, you're going to be low on speed and you have no altitude to work with. However, because I did climb, I have much more energy to work with. If there was anybody up here who I was scared of fighting, I could dive away and not have to engage them. Or there's everybody on the deck, who in even situations would likely trash on me, but because I set myself up for success by climbing at the start of the match, I was able to give myself a massive advantage over them. I have multiple chances to dive in on all these people, making gun runs on them before they'll ever have shots on me, which I personally think is much better than the opposite way around if I were on the deck. Overall, climbing is a great way to eliminate a lot of your weaknesses and overcome more maneuverable opponents. This is called boom and zooming, and you've probably heard the term before. And when you boom and zoom, it doesn't really matter how much more maneuverable the opponent is than you. Even if it was a Zero, which is one of the most maneuverable aircraft in the game that isn't a biplane, you can still just dive down on it, try and predict their flight path, and then zoom back up to 2,000 meters above them, where they'll never be able to shoot at you. You know, you can't lose a dogfight if you don't let yourself get caught up in one. Over time, as you improve and learn the strengths and weaknesses of your aircraft, you can incorporate boom and zooming into other strategies you have as well, and overall have a really rounded game plan going into every game. For example, pulling from my own experience in the P-47, I'm confident enough in my experience with the P-47 that I can go into fights that I would probably lose otherwise.
Log in to claim your seniority award. Look for the gift box in your storage, holding gold.
And make it relatively even if the P-47 is technically inferior. The one that's going to be the most time consuming though is learning the strengths and weaknesses of the other planes around you in the matchmaker. Most people in War Thunder only own like 1 or 2 nations, which leaves you with a pretty big gap in experience for a lot of other aircraft. However, there are still plenty of other ways to gain knowledge and try to apply it. The War Thunder Wiki is a good place to start. While a lot of the actual reviews in there are biased or uninformed, the actual stats are relatively good. You can learn what weapons they carry, how much they weigh, engine powers, stuff like that. Second off, what? I've done so many takes of this script that my voice is starting to crack. Second off, there are plenty of guides out there from both myself and the tons of other review-based YouTubers. Some of them better than others, but still, it's pretty hard to walk away from a video without learning anything, if your goal is to try and learn from it. I'm not gonna name drop anybody because that would be rude, and everybody has different styles of content they like to watch anyway. And finally, I know the War Thunder community can be a little toxic sometimes. Maybe a little is an understatement. But if you have a genuine question that you don't have the answer to, there are a handful of people out there who would love to help you out. There really is no harm in asking as long as you know how to filter out the trolls on the internet. But really the biggest thing in War Thunder that you should try and focus on is just having fun. I already know I'm gonna get a bunch of comments that are like, what, War Thunder and having fun? That's impossible. But please do, genuinely try and find ways to have fun. Other than that, that's all for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and oh boy, we just hit 10,000 subscribers. I don't have any other goals right now. I guess I'll think of something. But hey, that's all. Thank you for watching. Bye.